Have you ever had one of those weeks where every single day feels busy, but somehow nothing actually changes? Like Monday starts with motivation, Tuesday gets messy, Wednesday you're already behind, and by Friday you're telling yourself, okay, next week I'll finally get my life together. And then Sunday night hits, and instead of fixing your life, you end up lying in bed scrolling through random videos while feeling guilty for wasting another week. Yeah, most people don't actually have a motivation problem. They have a system problem. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. You do not need a completely new life. You don't need to suddenly become some ultra-disciplined robot who wakes up at 5 a.m., drinks green juice, journals for an hour, and studies perfectly every single day. Most people try to completely rebuild themselves every Monday morning, and that's exactly why they fail by Thursday. What you actually need is a better operating system, a way to reset, reflect, and realign before your life slowly drifts into chaos again. And weirdly enough, one tiny habit changed this for me more than any productivity hack ever did. A simple 10-minute Sunday review. Now, before you think, that sounds boring, wait. Because this is not one of those corporate planning routines where you spend an hour organizing folders and pretending you have your life together. This is more like cleaning your brain before the next week starts. Because think about it. Most people live on autopilot. Wake up tired, rush through the day, get distracted every 5 minutes, procrastinate, feel stressed, sleep late, repeat. There's never a moment where they stop and ask themselves, is the way I'm living actually working? And that's dangerous, because when you never pause to review your life, bad habits slowly become normal without you noticing. Suddenly, sleeping at 3 a.m. feels normal. Constantly checking your phone while studying feels normal. Feeling overwhelmed all the time feels normal. You slowly adapt to a life you never even intentionally chose. But here's where it gets interesting. The people who seem disciplined are usually not more motivated than you. They just notice when they're drifting off track and correct themselves faster. That's it. Meanwhile, most people drift for months before realizing they're lost. That's why the weekly review matters so much. It becomes a reset checkpoint for your life. Every Sunday, before the new week starts, you sit down for just 10 minutes and ask yourself a few honest questions. That's it. But those questions force you to become conscious again instead of living on autopilot. And the first question is probably the most important. What actually happened this week? Not what you planned to do. What actually happened? Because a lot of us lie to ourselves without realizing it. We say we were busy or trying hard. But when we honestly look at the week, maybe most of it was distractions, fake productivity, random dopamine, and mental exhaustion. So sit down with your notes app or a piece of paper and quickly review your week. What took most of your time? What drained your energy? What actually made you feel good? What habits made your life worse? And don't judge yourself while doing this. The goal is awareness, not guilt. Maybe you realize you kept sleeping late because you were scrolling TikTok until 2 a.m. every night. Maybe you noticed your best study sessions happened when your phone wasn't near you. Tiny observations like these change everything because now you're working with reality instead of fantasy. And this is the part nobody tells you. Awareness alone fixes a surprising number of problems because once your brain clearly sees a pattern, it becomes harder to ignore it. Then comes the next question. What's the one thing that made this week harder than it needed to be? Notice I said one thing, not 10. Most people overwhelm themselves trying to fix their entire life in one weekend, and that never lasts. Instead, identify the biggest point of friction. Maybe it's sleeping too late. Maybe it's getting distracted every time you study. Maybe it's wasting hours switching between apps because your brain is addicted to stimulation. Find the one thing causing the most chaos because improving your life is usually less about adding more and more about removing what keeps sabotaging you. Think about an operating system on a computer. If one broken background app keeps crashing everything, the whole system slows down. Your life works the same way. Now here's where most people make another mistake. After watching productivity videos, they create insane plans. Wake up at 5, gym every day, study 6 hours, meditate, cold showers, read books, perfect diet, perfect sleep schedule, and then 3 days later they quit everything because the system was impossible to maintain. So instead, the weekly review focuses on one small adjustment for the next week. Just one. Maybe your only goal next week is putting your phone across the room while studying. Maybe it's sleeping 30 minutes earlier. Maybe it's planning tomorrow before bed instead of waking up confused every morning. Small changes sound unimpressive until you realize consistency beats intensity almost every time. Because the goal is not to become perfect overnight. The goal is to build a system your future self can actually survive inside. And honestly, this next realization changed the way I think about discipline completely. Most people rely on feelings to decide their actions. If I feel motivated, I'll study. If I feel confident, I'll start. If I feel ready, I'll improve. But systems don't care about feelings. That's why the weekly review matters even when the week was terrible. Especially when it was terrible. Because instead of emotionally panicking and calling yourself lazy, you become analytical, calm, objective. You stop saying, I suck at life, and start saying, okay, what's not working here? That shift alone can save you years of frustration. And there's one more thing almost nobody does, but it's incredibly important. Celebrate one small win from the week. Seriously, your brain needs evidence that progress is happening. And no, the win does not need to be huge. Maybe you studied consistently for 2 days. Maybe you finally started an assignment you were avoiding. Maybe you spent one evening without doom scrolling. That counts. Because if your brain only associates self-improvement with pressure and disappointment, eventually you'll stop trying altogether. But when you notice small wins, your identity slowly changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone who always fails and start seeing yourself as someone improving little by little. And that identity shift is powerful. Now, this might sound simple, but the weekly review is honestly less about productivity and more about self-respect. It's one of the few moments where you stop ignoring your own life. A moment where you check in with yourself instead of constantly escaping through screens, noise, and distractions. Because deep down, most people already know what's ruining their peace. They just never slowed down long enough to face it honestly. And look, your life probably will not magically change after one Sunday review. But after a few weeks, you'll start noticing patterns. After a few months, you'll feel more in control. And after a year, you might become a completely different person. Not because of motivation, not because of some perfect routine, but because every week you paused, reflected, adjusted, and kept going. That's how real improvement actually happens. Quietly, consistently, one reset at a time. So this Sunday, try it. 10 minutes. No pressure. No perfect system. Just ask yourself, what worked, what didn't, and what small change could make next week better. That's it. Start small, but start today. Because you don't need a new life. You just need a better operating system.